My next guest needs no introduction, but is going to get one. He's the author of international bestsellers, including The Strange Death of Europe, The Madness of Crowds, and his latest book, The War on the West. Douglas Murray, let's start with the Biden White House, lurching from crisis to crisis, and we'll get into the heightened risk the country faces in the coming months. But first, we've now had 3 official explanations for Biden's debate performance. He had a cold, he was jet-lagged, and he was apparently over-prepared by staff. Which one of those excuses fits best to your mind?
It doesn't seem at all as though he was over-prepared. It is pretty amazing that the president put a whole week into preparing for this debate. First of all, because the consequences were so calamitous. But secondly, because, I mean, isn't he meant to be running the country? Isn't he meant to be the leader of the free world? I mean, it's an awful shame that an entire week had to be taken up just prepping for this 90-minute debate. He was obviously not on good form, as all of his sycophants have had to keep pointing out. The problem is that they have this line they've been doing for the last week, which is, you know, he had a bad night. Well, yes, but the evidence seems to be that he has a lot of bad nights and a lot of bad days. And their attempt, the sort of Biden court's attempt to pass this off as unusual simply isn't credible. I don't think it's going to wash at all.
No, and we've now got the White House declaring that Kamala Harris is the future of the Democratic Party.
I mean, one of the reasons why he picked the vice president, President Kamala Harris, is because she is indeed the future of the party. And he's very proud to have partnered with her and continue to partner with her in delivering an unprecedented record for the American people.
Douglas, she even referred to the Veep as President Kamala Harris there. Do you see that as likely? Could there be a move to replace Biden with Kamala now, or go to the election with her as the candidate?
I mean, here's the thing. Biden himself and Dr. Jill Biden, his wife, are clearly digging in. There seems to be little doubt about that. The campaign email that's just been sent out to everyone is along the lines of, you know, I was brought up never to quit, and I'm not a quitter, and Americans aren't quitters, so I'm not going to quit. You know, and when you're on the ground, you pull yourself up, you dust yourself off, and you get out into the ring again. I mean, this is fanciful stuff. Let me put it this way. You really believe, does anyone really believe that 3 years from now, Joe Biden is going to be in the Oval Office, is going to be able to be there, is going to be functioning as the US president? I really don't think anyone does. So at the moment, you're right. I mean, the White House press secretary and others have sort of started to mention Kamala Harris, but they do so, of course, knowing that her approval ratings are even worse than Joe Biden's, much worse than Joe Biden's. Her likability is through down the toilet. And, you know, this is a very interesting, it's not just about these personalities, it's also about the way in which politics is done now in America. You know, it's not rude. It is simply the fact that Kamala was a diversity hire, because Joe Biden said he wanted a black woman as his running mate. That means that instead of being able to choose from all of the talent in America, he could only choose from the talent within 7% of the population in America. And, you know, as I always say, if you live by DEI, you'll die by DEI, because now they have this hugely unpopular figure, the vice president, who has no meaningful achievements to her name in her years in office. Everything she's been tasked with, like the border, has not got better under her management, far from it. And here you have this person who they now cannot pass over because of their own rules that they have invented and decided to play by. So I mean, you know, it's not my concern, as it were, to advise the Democrat Party, but I would just say, you know, it's clear that Joe's not going to make it. It's clear that Kamala would lose to anyone. What are they going to do? If they're going to do a switch out, they're going to have to do it soon, because there's going to be somebody, whether it's Kamala, Gavin Newsom, whoever, they are going to have to introduce this person to the public very, very fast. And they don't have a day to lose, in my view.
Well, meanwhile, we've got much of the media who feigned shock at Biden's diminished faculties. They're falling back into line. Watch this exchange.
And we would invite the president to come here and tell us that directly.
Noted, Kelly.
But
he's awake.
That's inappropriate.
As you heard from your colleague, the president of the WHA, that's inappropriate. Thank you, Kelly.
That was NBC's senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell just telling off someone for suggesting Biden could be napping. And she's also the president of the White House Correspondents Association. And let's look at this unwitting admission from an activist journalist at CNN, Hadass Gold, who writes about how Biden's mental fitness could have been better covered. But then there's this tell. She writes, it can be tricky to report on something as difficult to define as a person ageing when his opponent isn't a convicted felon who regularly lies and has threatened to use the government to go after his political opponents. Douglas, how much culpability does the media have for hiding President Biden's, I would say, fairly obvious cognitive decline?
It's extraordinary, Rita. I watched the debate last Thursday night, and I watched the aftermath of the debate, the roundup and analysis on CNN and MSNBC. What struck me about CNN in particular was absolutely everybody in the studio was talking suddenly as, well, anyone at Fox has for the last few years, anyone at the New York Post has for the last few years, for which they've all been castigated. It was so strange seeing these CNN pundits suddenly switch as if they'd learned something in the previous 90 minutes that had previously been a mystery to them, a completely hidden secret, a hidden fact. How can they hold their heads up and still behave like this? These were all people who knew and could see everything you and I could know and see, but they decided not to observe it, and in actual fact to kick over the traces and to attack anyone who did observe it. And here they are, with the candidate that they want to use to get Donald Trump away from the White House. And they're only now realizing that their candidate has flaws. I mean, it starts to make you wonder how serious they actually are. And, you know, when they do all this kind of Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy sort of thing, you think, well, if you really thought that, would you really be running Joe Biden against that man? Wouldn't you have done everything you could to get the most talented team of upcoming, likable, capable young Democrats or middle-aged Democrats? It doesn't matter. But they didn't. And by the way, this line about, you know, Donald Trump using the law against his political opponents, that kind of stuff would sit a lot better with a lot of American voters if they weren't seeing the former president, Donald Trump, being repeatedly put on trial for things that are clearly politically motivated.
Absolutely. That is the golden rule of projection. So much of what they claim their opponents are doing, they're doing as we speak. And again, if CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, if they're a bit more honest with their audience, they would be aware of that. You mentioned the Democrats don't have much time to lose. If they're going to replace Biden, they better do it quickly. And one name that's always near the top of the list is Gavin Newsom as a possible replacement. You wrote about him this week in the New York Post, and he's the governor of California. California ain't doing too well. Can he fail his way up to the presidency?
I fear he could. Gavin Newsom absolutely wrecked San Francisco, which should be one of the world's great cities, and it's a garbage dump days. He proceeded to roll out similar policies across California as governor, and has made much of California into a dump as well. he talks all the time about the latest stuff about equity and equality and all that sort of thing, and he presides over one of the most extraordinarily unequal states. He's just sent his own daughter to a $60,000 a year private school, and maybe it's because among her own peer group in the state schools in California, you have kids with like 30% literacy and 34% numeracy. Skills. Now that's just a shameful record. He has no record to run on, but he does have, sadly, the sort of, well, look, a lot of people fall for this. People say he looks presidential. He looks the part. He has good hair. I mean, as we discussed last week, Justin Trudeau has good hair. Doesn't mean he could run Canada. It's the same with Newsom. I do fear that he could fool a certain amount of people. I think he would be a terrible choice because any Republican running against Gavin just has to point to California. And Ron DeSantis, when he debated Newsom earlier in the year, pointed out all of the things that can be pointed out against Newsom's record. But we'll see. I mean, he's definitely one of the candidates that the Dems are playing footsie with at the moment in their desperate attempt to ease out Biden.
Well, California is such a strange place because it's so blessed. It's got everything going for it. And like you said, it is a mess. There's so much crime, the gap between rich and poor, the failures in education. We could talk about it all day. Now, what I worry about most with what we saw from the president is the weakness that the Biden administration exudes and what that means for America, what that means for the world. Particularly when you look at the West's enemies, we are in a period of heightened vulnerability with the likes of Iran, Russia, China, knowing there's a few more months of this chaos in the White House. How do you see that? Because we do have conflict around the world, and you made the point recently that if America was more respected, if the Biden White House was feared, we possibly wouldn't have American hostages still in Gaza or have a Wall Street journalist in a prison in Russia.
Oh, that's absolutely right, Rita. I'm amazed that there isn't more outrage, really, in America, that an American reporter can be snatched in Moscow and held hostage, that still more than 100 Israelis are hostage in Gaza, including 5 or 6 Americans. I can't understand. I mean, the Thai government got their hostages out from Gaza through some weird deal. Seems that Hamas feared the Thai government or their connections more than they fear the US of A. I think this is, by the way, I think this is a very, very important thing for Donald Trump to run on. Which is that there's a situation that has emerged much like 79-80 with the Carter-Reagan election flip. Because if you remember, the Iranian hostage situation of American hostages in Iran was a drumbeat in the election process. And Reagan really soared in those days as he made it clear that if he got into office, the hostages would be released. And lo and behold, Carter was chucked out, Reagan came in, and the hostages were released. I'd like to see Donald Trump do something similar. You know, he can easily stand on that stage and say to Qatar, Iran, Hamas, I know you're listening. You better keep the hostages. You either make sure you return them the day I get into office. You better have them in perfect condition, or else. And I would like to see that from President Trump. I'd like to see that from any potential leader of the free world. And I think it's shocking that Biden and his administration have spent so little energy on this. And clearly, one of the reasons is that the president himself has no energy. He does take naps in the middle of the day. He is only functioning, it seems, for about 5 or 6 hours a day by the admission of his own officials. That's one reason why America is failing on the global stage.
Now, we've seen plenty of celebrities disgrace themselves with their lunatic views in recent months, from Robert De Niro to Susan Sarandon. And you can add Roger Waters to the list. The former Pink Floyd frontman has always been vehemently anti-Israel, but his demented views have appeared to have got even more French-dwelling. Have a look at this.
All the filthy, disgusting lies that the Israelis told after October the 7th.
Like what?
About burning babies and women being raped, which were all complete...
Actually, women were raped.
No, they weren't.
Yes, they were.
Well, there's no evidence.
It's been established by the United Nations.
You can say anything that you want, but there's no evidence.
Actually, there is extensive evidence.
There is no evidence.
Sexual assault and rape. Well, there is.
OK, well, all right, now...
Also, we know what Hamas broadcast on social media.
Calm down. Roger, calm down. Don't sink to his level. All right, I won't.
What level?
Well, stop shouting. Stop shouting back. Let him interrupt you as much as you want. OK.
I don't even know what's... I think he's got some sort of an imaginary friend also called Roger that he's speaking to off camera there. But this rape denial, and I said it's a French-dwelling view, but sadly it's not as French-dwelling as it should be, because you hear this over and over again from the pro-Palestinian crowd. And it is just so disgusting, so beyond shameful, because there is a great deal of evidence showing how women were raped and sexually brutalised on October 7 and beyond by Hamas, and that there's just this wholesale denial of it, Douglas.
There is, and I think there's a very interesting reason for it. Roger Waters, by the way, I mean, I don't know. I actually can't name a Pink Floyd song. Maybe that's my bad. But I mean, I care not a jot for this man Waters' views on anything. I mean, I don't know. Is he a guitarist? If so, he's just sick to playing the guitar. He's obviously a very sick individual, very sick in a number of different ways, a variety of ways. There's a whole conference in that thing we just watched there. But you know, I think there is a very clear reason why some of these people do want to deny the rapes, to deny the murder of children on the 7th. And it's because if they faced up to it, they would have to ask a question of their own side and of themselves, which they don't want to ask, which is, am I sure we're the good guys? You know, am I sure that my side, my friends in Hamas, in the case of people like Roger Waters, am I sure that I'm on the right side supporting Hamas, supporting the most militant Palestinian extremists, when they seem to be incapable of not raping, not murdering, not killing children, not kidnapping children? Am I sure my side's right? And there are only about two paths you can take from that. One is, maybe I should rethink my support for this terrorist entity and put my support elsewhere. Or you'd have to say, okay, I'm fine with that, by any means necessary. And some of them think that. Some of them do think that. But I would have a much more admiration for these people if, instead of always trying to deny and deny and deny, they actually faced up to the things that their friends do and did and would do again. But this Waters man, as well as a maniac, he's not a man. He can't even face up to the consequences of his own support and thought, such as it is. Now,
before you go, I have to ask you about Prince Harry. He's receiving yet another honour. The Duke of Sussex is set to receive the Pat Tillman Award for Service at the 2024 ESPYs. Pat Tillman was an American hero, late NFL star and US Army Ranger who died during combat in 2004. Pat Tillman's mother, Mary, is among those who are shocked by this award being given to Harry. She has said that there are far more deserving candidates who do not have Harry's money and resources, who are working quietly. She also said, I'm shocked as to why they would select such a controversial and divisive individual to receive the award. There are recipients that are far more fitting. There are individuals working in the veteran community that are doing tremendous things to assist veterans. But this is not new, Douglas. Harry and Meghan keep winning awards. It seems to be their full-time occupation these days.
They don't, I think we shouldn't say that they win awards. They don't win them, they get gifted them by the sorts of people they hang out with. I mean, there's a whole industry of this kind of rubbish. I mean, what happens with a lot of this is that Meghan or Harry's PR people put in calls to ask about various awards they can be given, and then they bring their celebrity to the awards process, and everyone benefits. I mean, it's so cynical. The Tillman one, this is sad because he was a real American hero, left the NFL, enlisted in the army after 9/11, and gave his life in the defense of his country. It's a sort of reminder, of course, of what is the sad turn in Prince Harry's life, which I think, is the only thing about him which is really interesting, which is that he had the opportunity to have a meaningful life in which he gave his life to the country and to causes like that of veterans, like that of young men who lose their way, like he did in his 20s, and can turn their life around. There was an awful lot he could have been a really meaningful figurehead for. And like his grandfather, the late Duke of Edinburgh, who set up the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, there could have been the Prince Harry Awards of, that he could have done so much with his life and the position he had because of the benefit of the birth he had. And instead, he took this other way. He took the Montecito Highway way. And here he is, not doing, but receiving awards as if he's doing. And I think it's a part of the inferno that one would not want to live in.
No, and before you go, Douglas, you've become such a big deal these days. You've now got your own impersonators, and frankly, they're good ones, I've got to say. Here is comic Army Kozak thanking you as you.
Douglas Murray, such a phenomenal job in the Monk debates, taking on the sophistry and deception and utter lies of Mehdi Hassan and those like him of his ilk, spouting and spewing lies about Israel.
He nailed it. I'm going to say Army's very good. That is, we've had him on this program, not as you, as himself, but he's very good. And this is the height of your fame now. He's normally impersonating Donald Trump and other world figures, and Douglas Murray now.
It's horrible in a way. He's a talented impersonator. It's horrible for your sense of self to see somebody taking you off, but he's very good at it. He actually is very amusing. A few nights ago in New York, I was in a steakhouse with some friends, and he came over to me and introduced himself. And I said to my friends when I rejoined him, he's very good, but to talk about self-consciousness and self-awareness when you have somebody impersonating you in front of yourself. He's very good. He's very good, but
he is very good. And if you're going to have someone impersonating you, it's good if they're a fan, and he's certainly a fan of yours. Douglas Murray, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Rita.